Hi everybody, it's Whitney from All the Shelves. I've been reading a ton of books in January, so I'm going to do a mid-month wrap-up of all the books that I've read so far. Since I've read so much, some of them I might just breeze through and show you the covers, and others I have more to say about, so I will spend some time with those. So here we go. The first book I read in 2016 was The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. This book was really good timing for me. I had just finished Fates and Furies. I was thinking about how conflicting narrators with different genders are working in literature, and this book is that too. It has the male point of view and the female point of view, and I've read some of the Bronte stuff. I haven't read anything by Anne. I think the other one she has is Agnes Grey, but I love Wuthering Heights and I love Villette, so I was really pleased with this book. It moved really quickly for me actually, even though it's fairly long. I got this book, Love, Lucy by Lucille Ball, her memoirs. I got it for Christmas from my husband. He had heard me say that I wanted to read a biography of Lucille Ball because I didn't know much about her, so he got me this. Look at this cover. She just looks so glamorous, right? Like, look at her. It's amazing. This book was fun. I don't think there was like a whole lot of scandalous stuff in here. Like, I got the feeling that it was kind of whitewashed for us. The most interesting part of the book was actually the production history of it, which was that she had died and her kids were going through her papers and they found this manuscript, and it was from, I think she had written it in the 50s, 60s, so I'm not going to remember that part. She had written it much earlier though. This was in the 80s when they found it, and they decided to publish it because their dad, Desi Arnaz, had a memoir and they thought that Lucy should get the same kind of attention and treatment. So I really loved that part of it. The rest of it was okay, a fun read, really fun if you're like way into Lucille Ball, and yeah, that's this book. Love, Lucy by Lucille Ball. I'm teaching a class this semester on early American superheroes, so to brush up on my history of Superman, I read this book, Our Hero, Superman on Earth by Tom DeHaven. I liked it okay. There wasn't like a whole lot that I hadn't heard before, and I much prefer Glenn Weldon's Superman history. It's way more comprehensive, and that would served my purposes. This one is short though, so if you're just like kind of interested in the history of Superman and want to know about the infamous lawsuits and the creation of and sort of where he went through the Silver Age, then this would be a really good place to start because it's so short and very accessible. I also read this book, The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherine M. Valente. I thought that it was great. I am not that into children's literature anymore, and I try to keep up with it, but sometimes I just have to admit to myself that I'm not like blown away usually by children's lit or YA lit, which is fine, like everybody has their tastes, right? This one though was violent enough to keep my attention. It was adult enough, like the themes were very adult and the adventures were very childlike. So it's like just this picaresque tale of a girl walking through fairyland and encountering all of these magical creatures, and she has to be the hero of the story. So I would definitely recommend it to young readers and adult readers interested in children's lit. I probably won't read the rest in the series, but I did really like this. On audiobook, I listened to Jenny Lawson's Furiously Happy. I think this cover is incredible. It's worth showing you the cover. I liked the book. It was great on audiobook. I really like, she reads her own writing, and I thought that worked really, really well for her. She's a great reader, and it kind of gave the writing life. Sometimes it would go off on these kind of random tangents, and I could picture her being really, this sounds meaner than I intend, but I could picture her being like really pleased with herself, which to me kind of called attention to the writing instead of the funny things she was saying. So I was kind of like, oh yeah, I see what she did there with the structure, instead of like appreciating her sense of humor. But that was only occasionally, and I think that this book is really fun, a great book to run to because it's so distracting. Like I couldn't wait to actually go running, which is a really good thing for cardio. So I would recommend Furiously Happy, but with some caveats that it's not like the very best writing that I've ever read. Another book that I read for my studies is Alternative Comics and Emerging Literature by Charles Hatfield. You can see how giant this book is. It's like an oversized book, and also it's in columns, which I just hate. It makes it easy to speed read, so that's nice because you can kind of just scan through it, but I just hate that format. It makes it feel so much longer than it actually is. That being said, besides the format, and you can tell he did it so that he could have full comics examples, which is really nice in a book like this. A lot of times the publishers have a hard time getting rights to these images, and this time it worked really well. And he also chose really good images to illustrate his points, which is not always the case because sometimes they're just going with what they can get. As far as the theory in it, I don't know how interested you guys are in that. He kind of rehashes a lot of things that I've heard before, but he says that this is like the realm of alternative comics instead of mainstream comics, which I disagree with. I think you can find very interesting things in mainstream comics, and I'm sure a lot of you have been finding it. So I didn't love the kind of snobbery here, but the writing and the theory is really solid. Some of the best on comics theory that I have read, although to be honest, that's not saying much in the field of comics theory. I've been making my way through the witches portion of the Discworld novels. I had never read Terry Pratchett before, so I decided to start with witches because witches are fun and cool. And so I finished up Lords and Ladies in that little series. I am loving these books. They're so funny and smart and not what I expected at all. I thought that I wouldn't really get the humor because a lot of times I feel like these kinds of books have a lot of references that I don't understand to other fantasy texts or like British politics or something like that. But I actually really love these, so I will be reading all of them. I wouldn't be surprised if I read all of them within the next couple years. Like, I'm breezing through these things. The next book I read was Edinburgh by Alexander Chee. I know that he has a new book coming out in March and people are really excited for it, so I thought that I would read his first novel to get a feel for what he's all about. This was a beautiful, beautiful book. Sad, like so sad, but beautiful. It's really dreamlike and it's not a quick read at all, and I had to break it up with other reading because sometimes it would lose my attention. I could tell that I was missing a lot to appreciate in the text, so I had to like go to something a little bit easier and then come back to it. Not that it's that difficult, but that it's just like really dense and complicated and really, really sad. Because I read the Alexander Chee novel, I also wanted to read Reflections in a Golden Eye by Carson McCullers. I love The Heart is a Lonely Hunter and Members at the Wedding, and I didn't realize that she had other novels. I knew that she had a lot of short stories, but this one is sort of like on the border between novel and novella. It's 127 pages, 136 with the afterword by Tennessee Williams, which I would definitely recommend reading. Even if you don't read Reflections in a Golden Eye, the afterword by Tennessee Williams is kind of incredible. It's the answer that you've always been looking for to people who don't want to read sad, difficult books or watch sad movies, people who always want happy endings. Tennessee Williams explains why they're wrong, which is really nice. I like that because I like sad stuff sometimes and difficult stuff. This book would be really interesting to study and read in a queer theory class. In the story, it's two sets of couples living in a barracks, and there's like all sorts of weird kind of twisting love interests. Like, everybody is kind of in love with a different person that they're not necessarily supposed to be in love with. There's a lot of talk about fitting a square into a circular peg and whether or not you should try to do that. So you can see how those themes would be relevant in a queer studies class. I really loved it. I love everything Carson McCullers does. She was like a genius, just a genius. I also read a collection of poetry this year. I'm trying to read more poetry. That was one of my resolutions. So I read Why I Wake Early by Mary Oliver. It was really beautiful. I mean, obviously it was beautiful, right? And she just has a way of helping you really appreciate the world anew. She also is dealing a lot with the sublime, which is something that I'm interested in, and how the sublime leads you to think that your rationality can explain and control the world, but how all of these physical experiences she's having in nature are actually just as important and maybe more important. So I was very, very interested in that concept in this poetry collection. And I also read some graphic novels this month. I always read some graphic novels. I read Eldritch Volume 1 by Aaron Alexander and Drew Roche. I thought that one was okay. I probably won't be reading any other ones in the series, but there was some really cool like Lovecraftian stuff going on in that. Not the racist stuff, but the weird monster stuff. I also read Severed by Scott Snyder. He does these horror comics. He did American Vampire, which I read like 3 or 4 volumes of. Those are good. This I even liked better though because it was so contained and so creepy. There's cannibalism, so if you're into cannibalism, check out Severed. I also read Supreme Blue Rose. This is written by Warren Ellis and illustrated by Tula Lotay. The art in this is incredibly beautiful. Sorry, I'm not an expert yet at showing art. Just really breathtakingly beautiful. The story is very convoluted, I think intentionally so, but really hard to follow, and also self-referential. I know that this was like used to be a different superhero, and so they're making a lot of references to that, which I kind of hate in comics. That's the hardest part about reading comics, is trying to follow all these threads that the industry wants you to follow, I think for economic purposes, which is just frustrating for a reader. But for the art, I was really interested in this. The next graphic novel I read was The Night Bookmobile by Audrey Niffenegger. I actually haven't read anything by her before. I've never read The Time Traveler's Wife, but I found out she did graphic novels and I was very interested in that. This story is about a girl who mysteriously finds in the middle of the night this bookmobile, and she realizes that everything in the bookmobile is books that she has already read, and as she reads more books are added to the bookmobile, and it's kind of like a book lover's dream, but also a cautionary tale about like the seduction of books, which was really interesting coming from somebody who writes books and loves books, so I loved this one. The other graphic novel that I really loved this month was Beauty, and I'm going to butcher this name, Carascote and Hubert. I mean, they're French, and I don't speak French. This is a story about a girl who is really unfortunate looking, and she scales fish and she is treated really poorly, and one day she saves a fairy, not knowing it's a fairy, and the fairy grants her a wish and she says that she wants to be beautiful, and it's just all of the consequences of being the most beautiful woman in her culture, and all the trouble that comes from that, but also all the power. I think I loved this book so much, not just because of the art, which was really appealing to me. The art actually reminded me a little bit of Nimona. I liked that. Oop, that's a nudie picture. There are lots of boobs in this book, just so you know. Anyway, I really liked the art in it, but I also liked that it never dissolved into simplistic ideas about beauty and superficiality. It was always very complicated and always undercutting itself through each little twist and turn in the stories. So I really love this. I would not be surprised if this one made a favorite list at the end of the year. And the last graphic novel that I read, I actually finished today, which is Relish, My Life in the Kitchen by Lucy Knisley. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I really liked this book. I was pleasantly surprised by it because I've read some other things by her, like travel logs, that I liked but weren't my favorite. I love Displacement. She wrote that about going on a cruise with her grandparents, and I loved this. It's a really interesting take on how the combination of words and images can enhance all our other senses. That's an idea that Scott McCloud had in Understanding Comics, and I think that she proves it a little bit here, although I'm still skeptical of his idea. Here is one page that is a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. And so she combines these recipes with what she calls food memories, and all of her memories of family and her life have revolved around food, at least the ones in this book. And it was beautifully drawn, really beautifully written, a nice tribute to her mother and father, who also have really cool relationships with food, and it made me want to start cooking again. I love books that inspire me to take up a new habit or to revive my interest in a habit, so I loved Relish by Lucy Knisley. Oh my god, that was a long video. I had a lot to say about a lot of these books. January has been great so far for reading. There have just been a couple kind of duds for me, but no like full-on splattered duds. Splatter duds is a thing I'm going to say now. So I would love to hear about whether or not you've read any of these books or whether any of them sound interesting to you. Just leave a comment for me in the comments down below. I am loving BookTube so far. This has been so fun and I've been reading so much. What a great year.